तो दोस्तों आज हम लोग निकले हैं पुराने किले जाने के लिए। वहाँ पे एक हेरिटेज वॉक है। तो हमारे एक मित्र है रमीन खान, वो बहुत ही बेहतरीन हेरिटेज वॉक करते हैं। हेरिटेज वॉक मतलब किसी एक जगह पे जाते हैं और वहाँ पे जगह के बारे में एक्सप्लोर करते हैं। तो आज का उनका पुराना किला हर हफ्ते ही वो करते हैं, अलग अलग जगह पे दिल्ली में करते हैं। तो आज मैं वहाँ के लिए निकल रहा हूँ और अभी मैं ग्रेटर नोएडा से निकल रहा हूँ। मुझे तकरीबन 45 मिनट लगेंगे जाने के लिए। चलिए शुरू करते जाएंगे। सो दोस्तों हम लोग आ चुके हैं पुराना किला में और हमारे साथ में है रमीन, और ये बताएंगे हेरिटेज वॉक क्या है हमारे अभी।
Heritage walk basically is something in which we start from the entrance of a monument. We discuss about the stories related to that monument. We discuss about the monument itself. And there are two parallel narratives going on about the people who built those monuments and the monument themselves. We keep on discussing. There are questions and answers from the audience as well. And it's a 2-hour event in which we cover everything about the monument.
सो इसमें मॉन्यूमेंट की हिस्ट्री, ओल्ड हिस्ट्री और मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री भी हम लोग कवर करेंगे।
Monument के तो basically every monument has different layers. It has served different purposes through different points of time. The same monument was a fort at one point of time. Other point of time there was a village inside it. Other point of time when the partition happened, there were camps set up inside this village. So there is a single monument can have many lives. Okay. And we will discuss all these lives.
फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर ब्रीफ में मैं अगर पुराना किला के बारे में अगर 1 मिनट में बात करूंगा तो उसके बारे में
ऐसे करेंगे कि इस एरिया का ये जो इतिहास है वो अपना इंद्रप्रस्थ से जो है कनेक्ट होता है. देयर आर स्ट्रॉन्ग लोकल ट्रेडिशंस व्हिच कनेक्ट विद इंद्रप्रस्थ. With the downfall of the city of Indraprastha, it was in ruins for a long period of time. Then Humayun built his city here. Then when Humayun was replaced, then Sher Shah built his city here. Then when Sher Shah was replaced, the place fell into ruins. And then a village called Indrapat, which was named after Indraprastha, came up here in 19th century. It kept on existing. And then after that, when the partition happened, during partition, there were camps set up inside this village
Purana Killa.
In the Purana Killa for Muslims who were on way to Pakistan. Okay. So the same monument, same place has 5 different lives that we know of. Okay. And many other lives which we don't even know of.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will cover this slowly, right? Yes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Gate that you see beyond the trees, that's called Talaki Darwaza, and that's the northernmost periphery of this fort. There are 3 gates in this fort, and that's the northernmost. You must have seen the central one, which is called the Bada Darwaza. That's the western gate, and then there is the southern gate, which is at the end of on the other side, which faces the zoo. It's 1526. The Afghan Empire sits snugly in the north of India, with Ibrahim Lodi at the throne. Ibrahim Lodi is a very headstrong guy, and he's a haughty and an arrogant guy, and he does away with the policies of his grandfather Behlol Lodi, does away with all the kindness, the brotherhood, the friendliness, the accessibility of his grandfather, which he gave to his fellow Afghan chiefs, and starts creating this distance between him and his nobles. His father Sikandar Lodi, a much more capable guy, has been able to create some distance between him and the nobles, but Ibrahim Lodi has different plans altogether. In the spirit of the great Guddu Pandit of Mirzapur of Amazon Prime, अब हम वो गुड्डू पंडित नहीं रहे जो लेवल करा करते थे. अब हमको चाहिए फुल इज्जत. 500 years before, Ibrahim Lodi declares, अब हमें चाहिए फुल इज्जत. And that's what he does. He unleashes a reign of terror on his Afghan nobles. And these Afghan nobles, part of whom are scared, part of them are pissed. And one of them is a man called Daulat Khan Lodi, who is the governor of Punjab. Now, in the great tradition of governors of Punjab affecting the destiny of the throne of Delhi, Daulat Khan Lodi moves west and invites a man ruling the Afghan homeland, Babur. Not only Daulat Khan Lodi, but Alam Khan, an uncle of Ibrahim Lodi, also pissed off with him. Rana Sanga of Mewar, also pissed off with him, invite Babur to invade India. The underlying assumption of this invitation is that Babur, like his ancestor Timur, will come, invade, conquer and then leave. But Babur has other plans. He turns that equation on its head. Come, conquer, stay. For 40 years of his life, Babur has not seen stability once. He is like a man on a chessboard, conquering cities, losing them, conquering other cities, losing them, and he has been on perpetual move. He gets this taste of India when he makes his first raid in 1505, and he keeps on raiding India, in fact only till Punjab, to loot and fill his coffers and leave. But what he realizes is that North India of that day is a fractured mandate, and Ibrahim Lodi, while being the Sultan, doesn't have the support of the people below him. After all of them are inviting ki bhai aa jao or attack karo. So Babur decides that for once, and of course Babur was ruling from Kabul, and Kabul was nowhere as rich as this country of Hindustan was. So Babur decides once and for all, he will come, he will stay, and his family will know the stability that he never had, and hence he decides to invade India. In the end of the year 1525, he enters India via Afghanistan, Lahore, Ambala, and by March he is at Panipat. On his one side is the Yamuna, on his another side is the Shivaliks, and in front is Delhi. Panipat has been the gateway of Delhi for long, and Panipat will decide the destiny of North India for not just this once, but 2 times again. Babur enters with a force of 20,000 men. Ibrahim Lodi has 1 lakh to report to him, of which 60,000 were horsemen and 40,000 foot soldiers. But this massive army of Ibrahim Lodi hides its weakness, because 50% of these soldiers are the soldiers of the Afghan nobility, who simply report to these nobles and have been collected from them to report to Ibrahim Lodi for the battle. So basically they have no loyalty to Ibrahim Lodi. They are loyal to their chiefs. To add to that, Ibrahim Lodi is not a very capable general, to be very honest, and his equipment is outdated. But Babur, with 20,000 men, hides 3 advantages. He is an extremely capable general who has learnt this skill the hard way, by winning and losing and losing and winning in Central Asia. His battle-hardened warriors have been with him for 2 decades, and they have learned to fight beside their general. His cavalry, the horsemen, are capable of showering barrage of arrows while riding on a horse, because of the invention of the composite bow, which is a very light form of bow which helps you shower arrows while riding on a horseback. And thirdly, Babur has artillery and firepower on his side. Gunpowder has been introduced to India just a few years back, but gunpowder has never been before used in a battle in India till then. It is Babur who uses it for the first time substantially. His gunpowder and his artillery is divided into 3 sections. There is the mortar, which is the heavy cannon, which is able to go in a steep trajectory. Then there is the light cannon, which goes in a flat trajectory. And then there are these matchlocks. Matchlocks are firearms which have a very long neck. All 3 of these will be used in the Battle of Panipat for the first time. And Ibrahim Lodi has no idea what is about to hit him. So what is Ibrahim Lodi doing at this time while Babur is entering into India and positioning himself at Panipat? Ibrahim Lodi is having a feast, celebration, distribution of wealth and gold, because he thinks that the only way to motivate this ragtag bunch of 1 lakh soldiers is to give them money. Ibrahim Lodi has no discussions on war strategy with his soldiers and his generals. He has no discussion on the position of Babur, that what is the defensive strategy that Babur will use. Ibrahim Lodi is supremely overconfident to wait for Babur to attack him, because Ibrahim Lodi has 1 lakh men and Babur has 20,000 men, and it is very simple. Panipat is a wide undulating territory. All Ibrahim Lodi has to do is to capture Babur's soldiers in a strong bear hug, and it will be end in 2 hours. Babur also knows that. So what he does is that he makes the front narrower. How does he do it? He shifts his soldiers to a few kilometers at a place on which on the left is a ditch, which is a dry Yamuna bed, and on the right is the city of Panipat, ensuring that the front is narrower. Now, what he wants is basically that the soldiers of Ibrahim Lodi to attack him from the front on this narrow stretch, and his cavalry can sweep in from all these 2 sides. You can see that in the image. On this narrow front, now Babur ties 700 carts in pairs of 2. So there are 350 pairs placed on this narrow front. Between each pair is a gap of 5 meters, which is hidden by shrubs and ropes. Behind that gap are men of Babur holding those matchlocks and operating those cannons. In the center of the stretch is the heavy mortar placed, and at the corners also. So the stage is set, but Ibrahim Lodi still wants to wait, and Babur can't let him wait. Babur wants him to attack him because his strategy is all defensive. What to do? Babur, in a stroke of genius, sends 4,000 of his men at night at the camp of Ibrahim Lodi to provoke him, so that they kill some of the soldiers of Ibrahim Lodi, and they get provoked and then attack. But the reverse happens. Ibrahim Lodi's men slaughters the 4,000 men of Babur, and yet आपदा में अफसर निकल आया, because now Ibrahim Lodi thinks कि बाबर के men तो ऐसे ही हैं. If we have killed 4,000 of these so easily, we will kill the remaining 15,000 also very easily. So 2 days later, Ibrahim Lodi attacks. The stage is set. The carts are in place. The cavalry waits on the flanks. The archers wait behind the matchlock men, and behind them waits Babur. And Ibrahim Lodi's men are so overconfident that they attack head front. And these men, they barge straight into those carts which had been tied by the forces of Babur. Behind the cart, these matchlocks and cannons start bursting fire on these men of Ibrahim Lodi, and there is havoc in the army of Ibrahim. So at this precise moment, Babur releases his cavalry from the corners, and this cavalry now starts moving around the men of Ibrahim Lodi and starts showering arrows on the men of Ibrahim Lodi. Ibrahim Lodi had 1,000 war elephants, about which he was very confident that Babur would have no answer to them. Babur's answer was these matchlocks and cannons, because these elephants are not used to these firepower. So when the cannon bursts or a matchlock is fired, they get disturbed and run amok among the soldiers of Ibrahim Lodi himself. So there is total chaos in the side of Ibrahim Lodi, and Babur's men start moving from around him, and the circle starts getting completed. At a precise moment, the circle is complete. The soldiers have surrounded the army of Ibrahim Lodi, and then there is a shower of bullets, cannons, arrows, and basically the war heads to its end. Ibrahim Lodi is asked by his generals to escape, but in that one moment of heroism, Ibrahim Lodi refuses and says that he will drink the cup of martyrdom with his men there and then and there. And this is what happens. Ibrahim Lodi dies on the battlefield. Babur's men have finally won the first battle of Panipat. The Afghan Empire has been routed. Babur's family would finally see some stability and would finally have a new homeland. It was called the Forbidden Gate. ये जरूर बताया जाता है. अब Forbidden Gate के पीछे भी ये बताया जाता है कि it was called forbidden because the people inside the fort were forbidden to come out until the emperor returned victorious. The problem is कि Humayun never won anything, and hence probably इस वजह से ये Forbidden Gate हो गया, बंदी रह गया. It's a joke. But what is true is कि when this was opened in 1913 by ASI for the first time, Zafar Hasan, who writes in his book that this hadn't been opened since its inception. It was built in 1540 by Humayun. How do we know it? Because there are some ink inscriptions inside which say कि may the realm of Humayun always be there. And then there are some other ink inscriptions which are all from age of Humayun. So we know that Humayun ki age mein this was built. This is about the gate. If you see on the top, you see these two jharokas. This jharoka is a Rajput or whatever, a Hindu temple, a Hindu architecture thing which has entered the architecture of all these Muslim rulers, especially in the Mughal age. You see the profuse use of black marble here. So black marble is a rarity in Delhi. It's not much used, but we will find black marble here also and inside also. Decides to give half of the empire to the Pandavas. The Pandavas demand 5 paths, which is the Tilpat, the Bagpat, Sonipat, Panipat, and Indrapat. And this was given to them by Kauravas. So this area was once upon a time, it is a belief, was once upon a time a heavily forested piece of land called Khandav Prasth. And what Pandavas did was that they burnt part of the forest to habitate it. And it is there where Indraprasth came to be. Indraprasth was supposed to be the jewel of the crown of Bharat at that age. It had beautiful, so all of this is written in the Mahabharata. That's what I'm telling you. It had beautiful streets. It had a massive fort. It had an ocean-like moat. It had magnificent buildings, lakes, gardens, ponds, towers, palaces. When the Pandavas burnt the forest, there was this demon called Maya, who was a master architect, and Lord Krishna gave Maya the responsibility to build a massive assembly hall in Indraprasth. This assembly hall, again mentioned in the Mahabharata only, had golden pillars, and it was the wonder of that age that when Narad Muni comes and meets Yudhishthir, he says that he has never seen such a hall anywhere. Now this is what is written in the Mahabharata about Indraprasth. Coming to this Killa. So excavations happened in this Killa to actually find out कि क्या इसकी actually story वहाँ पे connect होती है, उस age से connect होती है, whether it is ancient enough to go back that many thousands of years. And they did excavations here. So when they do excavations, ऐसा होता है कि basically क्या होगा कि there is a section of people living at a place at one point of time, then they go away, then in another century another people start living on top of it, then they go away, another section of people come and start living on top of it. So what happens is कि layers of habitation हो जाते हैं. Each layer is built of a different building material. Bricks के form होते हैं, baked bricks, and each of these layers has different elements remaining, like shards of pottery, coins, bowls, plates, terracotta figurines, ornaments, beads. एंड उससे आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट कैन टेल कि ये जो लेवल है ये विच बिलोंग्स टू विच एज. So the archaeological excavation that happened here tell us that first of all this place was an ancient place. The earliest form of habitation that was found in the excavations dates from the Mauryan age, and it is continuous from the Mauryan age. Mauryan, post-Mauryan, Shunga, Kushana, Gupta, post-Gupta, Rajput, Sultanate and Mughal. There is a continuous layer of habitation here which has existed. Now coming to pre-Maurya. So there is this form of pottery called painted graveware, which is a glazed grey pottery with dots and dashes. And if you find painted graveware substantially in a place, you can tell that there was this pre-Mauryan habitation in that place. Now in Purana Kila, they have not found painted graveware in substantial amount. They have merely found some remains of pottery here. So there are indications of pre-Mauryan age also here, but we cannot be sure. All of these remnants and all I'm telling you about, these figurines, these coins and everything, can be found in the Purana Kila museum, which we will cover in the end if we have time, or for those who can stay back for some more minutes, we will cover the museum then. Anyways, so excavation यहाँ हो गए. इंद्रप्रस्थ की एक स्टोरी है. What connects these two places then? So in the 14th century there is a book called Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi written on the life of Firoz Shah Tughlaq, and it says that Firozabad, his capital, which was centered in Firoz Shah Kotla, had the village of Indrapat in it. So in 14th century there was a village called Indrapat existing. Then Abul Fazl in Akbarnama says that the King Humayun built his sacred fortress at the same site where Indraprasth was there, Abul Fazl, in 16th century. Then there is a stone inscription which was found in the village of Narayana Vihar of today, which says that Narayana is west of Indraprasth. Okay. That stone inscription is inside the museum also. His brother called Hindal goes in Agra and declares himself emperor. Now Humayun has two troubles. He has Sher Khan in Bengal and Hindal in Agra, and Hindal goes and attacks Delhi also, this fort, Deenpana. Humayun's mother asked Kamran in Kabul to come and set Hindal right. So Kamran comes from Kabul and कि भाई Hindal तुम उसमें आ जाओ, क्योंकि जो है ये थ्रोन जो है तुम्हारी नहीं है. देन द मदर आस्क कि तुम दोनों भाई जाओ और हुमायूं भाई बड़े भैया की हेल्प करो. कमरान गोज और एंड इन द मिडिल ऑफ दैट मार्च रिटर्न्स, बिकॉज कमरान ऑल्सो वांट्स द थ्रोन. सो कमरान थिंक्स कि शेर खान को वो काम करने दो जो वो खुद चाहता है, एंड नाउ आई विल हैव दिल्ली. सो कमरान लीव्स मिडवे. नाउ शेर खान एंड हुमायूं बोथ आर ऑन side of Ganga, on the banks of Ganga in a place called Chausa. And Humayun, I'm not sure, maybe. And now Humayun is in two minds कि शेर खान से लड़ूं कि वो भाइयों को जाके देखूं. तो हुमायूं डिसाइड कि शेर खान तो फिर भी थोड़ा कॉशियस लग रहा है, भाई ज्यादा अनकंट्रोलेबल है, आई विल गो टू आगरा. तो ही सेंड्स शेर खान मैसेज कि लेट्स डू अ ट्रीटी. You can have Bengal, but you will be the governor and you will have to accept my suzerainty. Sher Khan accepts. And the last ask from Humayun is कि देखो एक और चीज है, झूठी मूठी थोड़ा पीछे चले जाओ और मैं तुम्हें दौड़ाऊंगा, और तुम एक्ट ऐसे करना कि तुम भाग रहे हो, तो इससे मेरी सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट थोड़ी बनी रहेगी इन माई सोल्जर्स. शेर खान is supposed to have done that also, and Humayun is now very jolly good again. He asks his soldiers to break the camp, and now they decide कि चलो वापस चल रहे हैं भैया, अब आगरा में देखते हैं हिंदल और कमरान का क्या करना है. But Sher Khan has just realized कि Humayun is no way matching to him as an adversary. So he tells his soldiers that the time to capture him is here. In one night of 1539, his soldiers attack the camp of Humayun, and the camp is slaughtered, and Humayun barely escapes from Ganga on a horse, and when he reaches the middle of Ganga, the horse starts sinking, and Humayun is about to meet his maker when a water carrier called Nizam comes to his rescue, gives him his device जिसमें वो पानी लेके चलते हैं, and helps him to come to ashore. Now Humayun promises Nizam कि तुम्हें मैं एक दिन का राजा बनाऊंगा इसके लिए. You will get to, अपनी throne है नहीं secure, but एक दिन के तुम जो है सुल्तान बनोगे, king बनोगे तुम. Anyways, Sher Khan has done what he wanted. He has crushed Humayun, and now he wants to consolidate his gains. So he lets his army go to Agra, and Sher Khan takes full control of Bengal and Bihar, becomes the absolute monarch of these two regions, gets the khutbah read in his own name, issues coins, sits on the throne. It's no longer rebel versus king, it is king versus king. Humayun reaches Agra, और आगरा में all his three brothers are already there. तो वहां पे रियूनियन होता है, सब गले मिल रहे हैं, सब गिले शिकवे माफ हो रहे हैं. Humayun forgives all his brothers for all the things that they were doing when he was not there. Resolution बनता है कि we will go joint against Sher Shah, and नेस्त नाबूद कर देंगे उसे. But that resolution is like our New Year resolution. वो जो जिम वाले होते हैं ना, because Kamran is in no mood to fight Sher Khan. He says कि मुझे ये आगरा का वेदर पसंद नहीं आ रहा है, मुझे काबुल ही जाना है. So in midway he leaves for Kabul. Now Humayun has wasted 7 months in bringing all his brothers together and deciding कि अब तो देख लेंगे शेर खान को और शेर शाह को. And now his brother has left. The most able brother is already left. ठीक है भैया. अब शेर शाह now attacks Agra. He swiftly, Sher Shah is not a Humayun. He swiftly reaches the region of Doab. Humayun has to assimilate his forces, but forces have a low morale because they have been beaten black and blue, and there are desertions from his army. So what Humayun thinks is कि now before enough desertions happen, let me attack Sher Shah. So he attacks Sher Shah, and this battle, unlike the last battle which is fought in Kannauj, is head on. This time there is no surprise battle in the night. It is head on during the day, and Sher Shah's troops annihilate the army of Humayun. Humayun has to run with his tail between his legs. He runs from Agra to Delhi to Lahore. Akbar is born, and the defeat that Humayun had faced will be avenged by Akbar in the second battle of Panipat. मस्जिद और शेरशाह सूरी, इसमें दो एलिमेंट मैं आपको दिखाना चाहता हूँ, देन वी विल मूव टू द अंदर पार्ट ऑफ द मॉस्क. एक तो पहले ये है, दिस इज इंटायरली इंस्पायर्ड फ्रॉम हिंदू आर्किटेक्चर. टोटल दीज अगेन वो जो हाथी जैसे आपको ये यहाँ पे ये दिखेंगे, ऐसे कर्व है, हाथी की सूंड के जैसा है, एलिफेंट ट्रंक. यू विल फाइंड दोज लिंटल्स सपोर्टेड बाय ब्रैकेट्स देयर. And basically it is said this mosque is in a transition period between the Sultanate era and the Mughal era. So Akbar's architecture in Fatehpur Sikri starts from here. I want to end Sher Shah Suri's life by telling about some of the landmark reforms that he did. Was administration. So what happens is कि Sher Shah is in Punjab chasing Humayun, and the governor in Bengal revolts. Bengal or Jaunpur was a pain in the neck of Delhi. Now the Bengal governor revolts, and Sher Shah has seen this all his life, that these governors who consolidate power in their hand and then they revolt because they have military prowess and they have wealth. And Sher Shah for the first time decides to change it. What he does is he divides Bengal into multiple districts. Each of these districts is headed by district unit chiefs. All these district unit chiefs directly report to the emperor. The provincial governor becomes provincial coordinator. He is just the eyes and ears of the emperor. चुगली करने के लिए to tell emperor कि कोई district unit chief सही काम कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा है. But the provincial coordinator doesn't have any military power or any wealth. These districts are managed by 3 people. Every district is managed by 3 people. One who maintains the military part, another who maintains the revenue, the judiciary and the civil affairs, and the third is the Qazi who takes care of the religious affairs. All of these 3 are parallel. Imagine, just see, the guy who is military doesn't have the revenue on his control, so that concentration doesn't happen. So 3 people in a district reporting upwards. All the districts were further divided into parganas. और परगना में भी यही डिवीजन था, रेवेन्यू, मिलिट्री एंड रिलीजन. द परगनास वर फर्दर डिवाइडेड इनटू विलेजेस. विलेज में द सेम स्ट्रक्चर वाज कंटिन्यूड एज बिफोर. द हेड वाज अ विलेज हेडमैन, बट विलेज हेडमैन वाज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द क्राइम ऑफ हिज एरिया. So now if a robbery happens in the periphery of this village headman has to capture that robber. And if he doesn't capture, he will suffer the consequences of that robber, which ensured that these village headmen took proper care of their own villages. Second is army. An imperial power rides on the shoulders of a terrifying army. और इब्राहिम लोदी के एज में क्या हुआ था? These chiefs had their own armies who used to send these soldiers to the army of the emperor, with the result that these emperors had these disjoint soldiers. What Sher Shah does is he makes his own army of 1.5 lakh soldiers. He personally is responsible for recruitment of these. Their salaries are decided by him. Their salaries are paid directly by him. Their salaries are paid on time and their salaries are paid incomplete, with the result that the army is loyal to only the emperor and no one else. Third, the road and communication network. Sher Shah realizes that roads and transport are important for military movements. They are important for for taking care of far-flung areas. They are important for fostering trade and commerce. So he built solid roads. One of those roads is the Grand Trunk Road or the Sher Shah Suri Marg, which he repairs it. It was an ancient road which he repairs it, makes it proper, and it starts from Sonargaon in Bangladesh and ends in Khyber or somewhere near Indus. He also builds a highway from Agra to Jodhpur and connects it to the ports of Gujarat. Then he builds a highway from Agra to Burhanpur and connects it to the ports of Gujarat. Then he builds a road from Multan to Lahore. All these roads exist today.
Yes.
On these roads, for the convenience of travelers and Ragirs, he built 1700 caravansarais. These sarais were divided. Separate section for use of Hindus, separate section for the use of Muslims. In fact, separate cooks were appointed. The Hindu cooks used to cook for the Hindus and the Muslim cooks used to cook for the Muslims. There was a place where you can take care of your pony with grains and water. There was this market you used to set up there. There was this postal dak chowki which was set up there. He, for the first time, after a long time, not for the first time but after a long time, standardizes the gold, silver and the copper currency. His copper currency and silver and gold are of standard metal weight and across his empire. His copper currency is called the dam. His silver currency is called rupiah, and it is made of 11 point some gram of silver. And this silver currency is then adopted by Mughals, then adopted by Britishers and the Portuguese, and the composition of silver remains the same. Eventually, Britishers do away with the silver content and bring in nickel after the World War, but the name rupiah stays, and the rupiah becomes the currency of independent India, and also the currency of other places also. This is the coinage. Then we come to architecture. Sher Shah Suri came from a very humble background. As I told you, his tribe was unimportant for all practical purposes. And he dethrones a guy who has a royal lineage straight from Timur and Genghis Khan. So Sher Shah Suri is afraid that he will be remembered as a usurper, as a humble usurper who dethrones a royal. So Sher Shah Suri decides to change it. Sher Shah Suri wants to be remembered as an ideal Muslim Sultan with a respectable lineage. To be remembered as an ideal Muslim Sultan, he builds these sarais, these stepwells for public welfare, roads. He builds religious structures like this mosque, like several other mosques. To now comes to the point of respectable lineage. What genes couldn't give his family, stones would. So he bestows royal respectable lineage on his forefathers by building grand tombs of them. And I've shared those images of those grand tombs. By also I missed one point in coinage. He started issuing those coins in which Shri Sher Shahi is mentioned in Nagari and also in Persian. So he started minting these bilingual coins. Also his coin has this presence of swastika. Some coins, I have both examples. I will share if any one of you want to see that. I've shared the image also. Anyways, coming to his architecture, Sher Shah Suri decides to build grand tombs for his forefathers so they can be remembered as a family of respectable people. So Ibrahim Khan Sur, who is a man with no importance during the time that he lives, is given a grand tomb. I shared the image of that tomb that is in Narnaul. It is built on Lodi style. It is better than all the Lodi's tombs put together. And he builds a madrasa also inside. And it is built near the tomb of some revered Sufi saint. Then comes the tomb of his father, Hasan Khan Sur. Hasan Khan Sur के साथ total love-hate relationship है. But he builds a grand tomb for his father. Inscribes it with the most, मतलब इससे ज़्यादा कुरानिक इंस्क्रिप्शन किसी मॉस्क में मिलेंगे ही नहीं, वो किसी टूम में मिलेंगे ही नहीं, इतने कुरानिक इंस्क्रिप्शन है. Also builds a mosque and a madrasa there. So what he does is, he wants you to remember his father and his grandfather as very respectable and religious people. And that's why they have this attached mosque and madrasa with them. Then he builds his own tomb. And that was the greatest tomb of his time. And that was built on the lines of the octagonal tombs that we saw in Lodi Gardens. I will just get down. Of Lodi Gardens. But again, better than all the tombs of Lodi Gardens. And hence I called him the Alpha Afghan, because he was the greatest Afghan that ruled India. And his architecture was the greatest architecture at that time. If you have been to any Buddhist stupas, वहाँ पे एक चैत्य करके एक चीज होती है, चैत्य. This is चैत्य. मतलब this is चैत्य का एक representation है. So indigenous and Islamic architecture both is represented here.
Was this done with the intent? Was it purposeful या ऐसे ही बस inspired?
बेसिकली वही मैं कह रहा हूँ, इस मॉस्क को पता नहीं बनाया ही ऐसे गया है कि जैसे कि कोई किताब लिखी जा रही हो आर्किटेक्चर पे. तो दे हैव इनकॉर्पोरेटेड ऑल द एलिमेंट्स. एंड आई डोंट नो कि मतलब क्यों, मतलब ये था, बट ये तो पक्का है कि उन्हें पता है, उन्होंने देखा होगा बुद्धिस्ट आर्किटेक्चर. हाँ, मतलब ऑफ ऑल स्टाइल ऑफ आर्किटेक्चर.
शोकेस था, शोकेस बोलते हैं ना,
शोकेस है ये पूरे 500 साल का. नाउ कमिंग इनसाइड द मॉस्क, you see that's the squinch which helps you transition from a square space to an octagonal space. But यहाँ पे squinch ऐसा है और वहाँ पे देखिए कैसा है.
कितना डिटेल स्क्विंच है.
And that is called, उसको exactly नहीं बोलते, but एक मैंने आपको इमेज भेजी, which is an image of Mukarnas. Mukarnas are found very much in Central Asia. और उसमें ना ऐसे आर्चेस के बहुत सारे वो होते हैं which makes it resemble a beehive. I will not say it exactly like that, but कुतुब मीनार की बालकनी के भी नीचे ऐसे मुकरनाज हैं. तो मतलब एक you see two style of squinches here. You see the 6-pointed star right there. You see the lotus. You again see the chakra representation. Come here. इसको दूर से देखिएगा.
कलमा है.
Those who have come with me in the Qutub Walk, I told you that the first, the art structure of the mosque inside had a lot of representation of life, जिसमें कैलीग्राफी के अंदर बहुत सारे फ्लावर्स थे. कैलीग्राफी के अंदर फ्लावर्स भरे हुए. Again, probably a representation of that page. Again, we see these tulips, which have been inspired from Alai Darwaza. So the widow of Bahar Khan Nuhani, called Dudu, appoints Sher Khan the caretaker of her younger son, Jalal Khan, who becomes the king now. Now, it is at this moment that Sher Khan does his master stroke. He marries 2 widows. One is the widow of the governor of Chunar, another is the widow of the governor of Ghazipur, both of whom Sher Khan had gone for employment, and he marries their widowed wives. These 2 widows as dowry bring Sher Khan a lot of wealth. Basically, he becomes a caretaker of their wealth. So now Dudu the widow makes him the caretaker of Bihar. 2 widows make him the caretaker of their wealth. There is another widow, a sister of a family who is related to Behlol Lodi. शेर खान उसको भी अपनी चरण में ले लेते हैं. शादी नहीं करते हैं, बट केयरटेकर उसके भी बन जाते हैं, बिकॉज शी वांट्स प्रोटेक्शन फ्रॉम हर रिलेटिव्स and takes over her wealth also. So by these strategic alliances and marriages with widows, Sher Khan's influence, power, wealth rises in Bihar, with the result that he becomes the ruler of Bihar for all practical purposes. Now the boy king Jalal, so Dudu dies. Now Jalal is alone and Jalal is afraid of Sher Khan ki to mujhe bhi maar dega. So Jalal Khan runs to Bengal, where Nusrat Shah is ruling, and asks him to save him. And Nusrat Shah attacks Bihar, and Nusrat Shah gets defeated in Bihar, and Nusrat Shah goes back. Now the influence of Sher Khan has further risen. Now Nusrat Shah is dead in some time, and Sher Khan attacks and conquers Bengal itself. And it is here Mr. Humayun rises from his slumber and realizes the threat that he was facing. So now the 2 stories intersect. Sher Khan eventually defeats Humayun, makes him run away to Umarkot. And Sher Khan becomes the ruler of Hindustan. Sher Shah Suri now. He is the ruler for 5 years. In that years, he captures Punjab, he captures Malwa, he captures some parts of Rajasthan called Mewar and Marwar, and then he turns to Kalinjar, a very strong fort in southern UP or in Bihar, on the border. And it is in Kalinjar when he is, inspecting there is a siege in Kalinjar, and he is inspecting his siege. And a cannon comes and hits the wall of the fort, rebounds from the wall and falls among other cannons, with the result that there is a massive explosion and Sher Shah gets burnt from head to toe. He is on his deathbed, and even in his death he is worried कि Kalinjar capture हुआ कि नहीं हुआ. It is told that it is a story that when he is told that Kalinjar is captured, he takes his last breath and dies. Within 10 years of his death, his successors lose the empire of Hindustan. He is followed by his able son called Jalal Khan, who becomes Islam Shah Suri, who is as capable as a warrior as his father, but is very insecure of the nobles of his father, with the result that he purges all the nobles in the court, and he would have incited a rebellion like Ibrahim Lodi had he not died premature of a urinary infection. Now Islam dies, and his younger son is killed by his cousin Mubarak, who becomes the emperor by the name of Adil Shah Suri. Now Adil Shah is thoroughly incapable. He is more interested in music and dancing and singing, with the result that his prime minister called Hemu, and the story of Hemu will come in the next walk, becomes so powerful that he becomes everything of that empire, of Adil Shah's empire. Hemu rose from a shopkeeper in Rewari to become the most powerful man in North India, mind you. So, because of the weakness of Adil Shah, his two cousins, Sikandar and Ibrahim, also declared themselves as emperor. So that there are three emperors in North India itself. Sikandar, Ibrahim and Adil. And Adil Shah wants to sing and dance. With the result that Adil Shah's music becomes the swan song of Suri Empire. Eventually, they kill themselves और रेस्ट जो बचता है उसको आके मुगल्स नेस्तनाबूद कर देते हैं. And Humayun comes and takes back his throne, and we will discuss it later. Adil Shah, mind you, it is told, was the teacher of Tansen and Baz Bahadur.
Oh, wow.
I have read this in two books. I am looking for the exact literary reference जहाँ पे ये आता है, but it has been mentioned in two books that he basically बंदा बढ़िया था, emperor बनने के लायक नहीं था. The chhatri on top, there is a central room in between with 4 rooms around it. It is built of red sandstone. Again the 6-pointed star comes back here. We don't know what was it used exactly for. It is assumed that it was a pleasure pavilion. It is at a higher point than all other points here. तो वहाँ टॉप पे खड़े होके you used to get good breeze and good views probably, but we are not sure. Now there is this story about Humayun and this monument. He goes to the top and then he hears the azan. So he sits right there on the steps and starts praying. He completes his namaz, and as he is getting up he gets disbalances and dies. Now this monument is supposed to be that monument. It is supposed to be. There are some theories which connect this monument to that monument. So in Akbarnama, Abul Fazl says that Humayun establishes his library and observatory near the mosque of Sher Shah, and he waves from the top of the library to those who were worshipping in the mosque. मतलब होता ना वो सलाम कर रहे हैं, ऊपर से वो वेव कर रहे हैं. तो अकबरनामा में there is a mention of this.
Okay.
अच्छा, since this monument is very close to the mosque, so one can probably assume कि यही था, but we cannot be 100% sure कि यही था, क्योंकि इसका ये जो monument है ये stand alone है, इसका हमें पता नहीं है कि ये क्या था. असरुस सानादीन में सर सैयद अहमद खान, the good old guidebook which basically has decided all of the history that we know of. सर सैयद अहमद खान से कि शेर मंडल वॉज द प्लेस जहाँ से हुमायूं गिरे थे, और उसके बाद से गाइड बुक्स में वो मेंशन होने लगा.
वॉक यहाँ पे एंड हो गया ना. तो रजत भैया कैसा लगा?
भाई मेरी तो 4th वॉक है, अब आप समझ सकते हो, हर वॉक में आ रहा हूँ मैं, तो अच्छा ही लगा.
ऐसे ही डायबिटीज कम हो जाएगा.
डायबिटीज नहीं है भैया.
कैसा लगा आपको, बताइए.
बहुत बढ़िया. रामीन हैज दिस टेंडेंसी ऑफ इंफ्यूजिंग लाइफ इनटू दीज मॉन्यूमेंट्स. अपने आप में सिर्फ इमारतें हैं, बट रामीन ब्रिंग्स देम अलाइव, एंड ये हमारा चौथा वॉक है, और बाकी जितने भी होंगे हम सब करेंगे.
राइट.
मजा आया,
सबको मजा आया.
बहुत मजा आया.
आपको कैसा लगा? आप तो नए हो.
So usually I'm from Lucknow, and when I came to Delhi felt like a place where it has no culture, because it is a place where everyone can belong. But when you go ahead and look at these monuments, you infuse what it means to actually live where people live. Like, these are the places where real people walked, and we now know more about them. We can know more about what it meant to actually serve or exist or even feel a breeze here.
वेरी गुड. थैंक यू वेरी मच. तो दोस्तों, इसी के साथ हम लोग का वॉक ख़त्म हो चुका है, और ये व्लॉग को मैं यहीं पर ख़त्म कर रहा हूँ. काफ़ी लंबा हो गया है, बट काफ़ी ज़्यादा इन्फॉर्मेटिव है. और अगले बार मैं अपने डिस्क्रिप्शन में रमीन की फेसबुक आईडी दे दूँगा. अगले बार जब भी वो वॉक करेंगे आप वहाँ पे आइए,
देखिए, सीखिए, बहुत सारी चीज़ें सीखने को मिलती हैं।